Welcome back to the Insurgent Mindset. I'm Matt Tice.
And I'm Rondo Moses. This is a podcast about challenger thinking in a world shaped by disruption.
In each episode, we explore the strategies and leadership mindsets that help businesses break from the pack and stay ahead in fast-changing markets.
Yeah, you'll hear conversations, case studies, and insights from leaders who are applying these mindsets to thrive in this uncertain environment.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Apple Podcast or Spotify, and check out our companion blogs at insurgentsgroup.com for a summary of takeaways from each episode. Now let's get into it, Rondo. We have a great guest today, Jamie Engel, who is the founder of Neutopia and a man I've known for a little while who's doing some really, really interesting work. So I'm looking forward to having you aboard, Jamie. Why don't you join us? And there
Hey
he
guys.
is,
Hey, Jamie.
Jamie in the flesh. So, Jamie, I've been looking forward to having you on the podcast, in part because we've been doing so much work together, but also I think you bring a really unique perspective to education and media and the future of both of these things. And maybe it'd be great, Jamie, just to hear your story. Like, how did you end up here? How did you found Newtopia? Give us a primer on the Jamie Engel story.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Matt. So I guess the relevant things that come into my background would have been studying architecture in undergrad, and then finding myself teaching myself in the early 90s 3D animation when it wasn't a thing. Like this is back before Jurassic Park. So even before it started getting into really going with being in lots of movies. It was just the start of that era um, of visual effects. And so I stumbled into a place in San Francisco thinking I was going to learn AutoCAD for architecture, and they had this giant refrigerator-sized computer and all these fans on it. I was like, "What does that do?" And they said, "Come over here, we'll show you." And the guy just flew a camera, digital camera, so the on the screen, right through a cube. And I was dumbstruck. I was like, "Are you kidding? You can do that?" And so I was like, "I don't want to learn AutoCAD. I want to learn that." Thinking in my head, I remember th actually having this thought, I don't even know what kind of jobs there would be with this. Like, what would you do with this? But I just knew that's all I wanted to learn now. So I taught myself and then found myself kind of winding through at the start of the industry being in Los Angeles. I went back to school for a master's in computer animation and film at University of Southern California and got a job at Warner Brothers. They had this early division called Warner Digital that was going to be their in-house digital department. And so I started working on movies like Mars Attacks and a Schwarzenegger film. And so this is kind of mid 90s, and then worked at Sony Pictures and just found myself in the middle of the industry starting, and it was amazing. And the other thing that's probably relevant is when I was at University of Southern California, I had to take a prerequisite course in screenwriting, and I found that also fascinating because they were talking about three-act structure, and it sort of dawned on me that they're talking about the architecture of emotions. So I had this background in architecture of built environment. This was the architecture of emotions. I thought that's amazing. I want to learn how to do that. So I wrote a film script, just really as a way to learn the craft of how do you do it. Like just picking up the tools if you were going to build a building to learn architecture, make a film script to learn screenwriting. So I guess there's all these kind of synchronicities or things that came in my path that influenced me later on. So did that for many years, moved to Australia and worked in post-production for about 15 years total, I think. So on movies and TV ads, and all the while was writing film scripts because I really wanted to go down that path as well and make a film. And so I guess the other thread might be cinematography, being very interested in how you create and master pointing people's attention towards something by the way you compose the screen and the lighting and the motion. So did all that, and then spoke at Vivid Festival, and some people from a design college in Sydney said, "Hey, do you want to be a teacher?" I thought that is not on my radar. I don't think so. But it's sort of made me semi-terrified the thought of it. I was like, that sounds so scary. Okay, I'm in. And I think I've always had this pattern of like, if it makes me nervous, there must be something there to check out because it's doing
Mm.
something to me. So I thought that sounds so terrifying. Okay, what do you want me to teach? And they said, we have a brand management course and we think you'd be great. I was like, oh, I've never worked in branding. And like, doesn't matter. You talked about storytelling. That's what we think is really fascinating and what you're good at. So I said yes, and within 2 weeks, it's one of those things you know when something's a good fit. It's like an old pair of jeans. I was like, oh my God, I'm made for this. I love teaching. And the thing that captivated me with teaching was I just fell in love with the students. I was like, wow, to be so privileged to be at the intersection of a person's life at 19, 20 years old. I just was like, tell me about what you want to do with your life with every student. I was like, just leaned right in. And I was like, wow, I reckon that I know a TED Talk that would be good for you. And I know this thing that would be good for you. And you got to check out this book. And just things were coming into my head from all the curious things that had studied. And so that went along for a few terms, and then I got kind of bored, and I was like, I don't understand. Why does no one like this learning platform? It is pretty bad. And it's weird. This is a design college, and the courses are not particularly beautiful. And I thought that's kind of weird. And then I just found like so many people were complaining about the learning platform, and I was like, "Do you guys talk to each other during outside of class? And like, how do I get you this TED Talk? I know a really good TED Talk." And they'd be like, "I don't know." And I was like, "Maybe I don't know how to use this platform." And I dug a little more and they were like, "No, you can't." I'm like, "This is weird." So it's 2014, and you guys don't talk to each other online, like via the school. So just a bunch of things happened, and I just it kept kind of being in my mind like, God, there must be better tools. So I tried Facebook groups, and then I tried Slack, and nothing worked really good. And I just thought I'm gonna build something. Like, why not? At the same time, because I was getting bored with the course, I was like, I want to make a better course. It's like what I think I would want to learn. Like, I want design students to be good at business and be good at technology. So they're like trilingual. So I guess that's all the things that preceded Neutopia was just a total passion and love for the students and an utter curiosity for how learning happens, and especially how learning happens as a community, as a group of people. So
Mm.
yeah.
Interesting. So we've talked on this podcast before, Jamie, a little bit about how education is sort of in this long wave of disruption, how that's changing. It'd be interesting to hear now your reflections on kind of the bigger picture around media, education, how those two things are coming together in your mind, and then reflecting on, what is going to be different and how does the experience of learning start to evolve in that direction?
Okay, so I guess something I started to think about, I really wanted to dissect. I was getting curious to dissect, like I kept asking myself and looking at learning happening at the school and in my classes and out in the world. And I was like, what makes learning great? Like what are the ingredients of a
Mm.
great learning experience? And I started sketching this like three-layer cake and thought, okay, wait, if we break it apart, what is the architecture of a great learning experience? So back to like architecture of screenwriting, architecture of built environment, I was getting like, what's the architecture of learning? And I thought, huh. So we have a platform. So platform is a technology. Now, a book could be a platform, right? Like I'm not saying it has to be high tech. A book,
Mhm.
a pen, these are technologies, right? But currently it's a digital platform is what we're saying is the technology. And then the next layer is the program. So I went platform program. So a program is like a book, it could be a story, like a book or a movie. It's some journey. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So there's the screenwriter in me going, that's where that fits. That's not the platform, that's the program. And interestingly enough, I was starting to think like if anyone if the person, if you're listening and you know the hero's journey with Joseph Campbell, that structure typically has 12 stages. And I thought, oh, that's funny. There's 12 weeks in a term. And it feels like a hero's journey, and the student is the hero, and me and all the books I reference and TED Talks and other people are the mentors. That fits really good. I guess learning is a transformational arc because the hero, the student, is different at the start and at the end of that course if it's a good journey, right? So I really thought in terms of like curriculum design and learning design is course design is like writing a movie, and you want to make it exciting and have emotional twists and turns and high points and low points, and learning has that, like the midterm scary turn, and that fits right at the midpoint of a movie. So it
I
just
still wake
felt,
up in the middle of the night thinking about that, Jamie.
what's that?
Right.
I still
Yeah.
occasionally wake up in the middle of the night thinking about those midterms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And the final is the climax, right? Like it
Right.
fits perfectly. And then the next layer, the third layer is the person, the guide, the mentor, the facilitator. And back when I was thinking about this, there was a lot of questioning, pure like that expression, stage on the sage, that's over. And now the teacher is the guide and the men. And so people were talking about this. And I thought, oh, that's it. So it's platform, program, people, person. And it's like how, when you really think about it, how many learning experience do you get all three to be a 10 out of 10? Like, totally, it's pretty rare, right? Like maybe 2 out of 3, you're doing good. Like lousy platform, but a great course and the teacher's amazing. You can get by. Or platform and program are good, but the teacher's really boring. Like, okay, well, I'll just dig into the course. So I really thought, wow, that's rare. And probably more times than we'd like to say, you get 1 out of 3. Like
Mhm.
teacher's amazing, but the course is terrible and the platform is not great either. So I just kept that helped me think about how do we design this well? And I zeroed in on, like, I knew that, students said I was a good teacher, so okay, I can manage that. And I rejigged a course thinking, how can I bring screenwriting thinking to art, giving it a transformational arc? So those were the experiments I was doing in class. And then I was like, I guess I got to build a platform because Facebook groups didn't work because term one, people shared stuff, but term two, nobody knew what we shared up in the feed. And then Slack came out and it had the same issue. It was the same pattern. And I thought, what's the right pattern? It's Spotify. It's like asynchronous, not synchronous. You can make a collection, you can follow interests. So that was the early thinking in Neutopia, the personalization. And also the curation that is like with so much content on the web, why are they making courses from scratch? Like why would I explain the hero's journey when you could listen to Joseph Campbell himself on a video? And why would I recapitulate some great speaker when they've done the TED Talk in 8 minutes? So I was like, I just need to be like a DJ and go bit of that, bit of this, put in a music video. I used to put happy in just to change the emotion of the week. Like, don't get so heavy, everybody. And just, artwork and, images and infographics. And I was like, oh, it's a curation thing. Like, you want to be a good curator as a learning designer. Not everything has to be from scratch. There's so much good stuff you can leverage. So that was kind of like the early thinking is like curating. How do we allow curation? How do we allow following an interest, personalization, sharing content so that it's a different style of building learning experiences and it allows a social layer, like connection with each other and chatting with each other. Um, so I guess that was the kind of that phase of my thinking about learning.
So Jamie, our audience is mainly C-suite leaders, right? So if you're a CEO or chief marketing officer or learning and development, you know, how do I take what you've just described and put it into the context of how I create business impact. And how do I use this disruptive thinking about architecture and storytelling and platforms,
Mm.
the sort of the holy trinity almost that you just described, and turn that into value for these leaders?
I guess the first place I'd be consistent with what I'm talking about and say the leader is the storyteller. And that's not coming from me. Steve Jobs spoke about that. Venture capital leaders speak about this, that people follow the money, for this great quote, the money follows the story. And you could say with movies, attention follows the story. So
Mm.
I think mastering the craft of storytelling cuts through lots of noise. I think it does create emotional uh people lean into a story. If you say, wait, I have a story to tell, everyone leans in. If you say I have data to share, I don't know if they lean in quite as much. So I think mastering the craft of storytelling then follows all modern thinking, let's say Brene Brown on leadership, being authentic, um, being vulnerable, sharing real stories. It's all about emotion. So you could also
Mhm.
say money follows emotion as well. And we know even with, people will say the stock market moves on people's emotions, their fears and desires, less so than the data maybe. So I think being the leader or the leadership team, you're creating the vision for the company and where it's heading, and that is, empowers HR, it powers attracting great talent. It informs marketing. I mean, another reference to Steve Jobs is he looked at every bit of marketing, every bit of copy, every single word. So I think leaders that master the craft of storytelling or go on that journey, that's one key bit of relevance. And then one of the people I came across in all of my learning journey was Peter Senge as a
Mm.
strategist. And he talked about the concept of a learning organization. And it's funny because, he said that decades ago, and I don't hear that it kind of like was a bit of a thing. And then I was thinking about it, like it's kind of you don't hear that much anymore. And yet I think he is totally on point. I think his theories around if if you're going to move quick and everything's moving quicker than ever now with AI, that you creating a culture of everyone to fail and learn, feel safety. Now we're back to Brene Brown, safety to try and fail. That's very entrepreneurial, like try stuff. If the culture doesn't support that type of thinking, then everyone's like rigid and they're not going to
Yeah.
feel flexible and adaptable. And with AI, the way it's come in so quickly and it's speeding up, I think agility, adaptability, all of that is a absolute number one, number two requirement. So I guess being the storyteller and being the holder of the culture and if you're a founder, kind of the soul of the company, um, I think those are incredibly relevant skills. Like, what kind of learning culture do you have? Is it a learning organization? What are you using to support that for everyone? What tools? What's in the culture? So that's what I think the main relevant ideas would be.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on what you said about the learning organization because it was a concept that was talked about a lot maybe 10 years ago. You don't hear as much about that, but I did some work with a couple of pharmaceutical companies working with their learning and development organizations, which were then considered formerly their training. They went from training to learning and development organizations as they were trying to evolve. And this whole concept of a learning journey came up when I was working with one of these large global pharmaceutical companies, and the idea that in this case, it was for their sales and marketing functions and people in those sales and marketing organizations, and how could they create learning pathways for each individual marketer or salesperson that sort of identified where they were in their learning journey and where they were trying to go. So it's sort of like what you're describing. So when you think about Neutopia's learning platform, which customer segments is it really designed for, and how it's being used today?
I guess the main focus today is learning institutions, so colleges and universities. But I know Matt through us working together for ADHD, so you say a not-for-profit. We're also have, I guess, another sector might be industry associations would be another one.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and I guess. Probably what I've noticed is there's it's less about the segment and more about a common way of thinking, like because those are quite different segments for different reasons. What's the common thing? What I see as the theme is leadership or the people going, this is how we want to craft how learning happens, are leaning into innovation. They're going, okay, we're willing to question how it's been done and look at new ways of how it could be done. Or going back to first principles, like, wait, let's just get back to like, why has it been done like this? And are
Hmm.
we open to shifting and what would that impact be and what might that take to support? So I tend to gravitate towards um, thinking about it's a good fit for us with an organization if they have those attributes. If they don't, it's like, I don't know if it's a good fit because using the platform but not shifting the culture or the vision of where you want to head, I don't know if I could honestly say you'll get the right results. So tend to be very, very honest because I think it's better all around. I think it's saying like, are you really up for doing things in a new way? Like, do you really want to create a community? Or do you just want to manage people? So I think if they're like, oh, we think it's a good idea, but we still want to tell people what to do, I'm like, well, I don't know if that's really this isn't a directive kind of platform. This is a platform that you're saying we want everyone to come together as a community. We want it to be inclusive. We're open to hearing what you think. And I'm noticing the schools we're working with really want the voice of the student at the table. They're saying we really do care what you think, and we want you helping shape and guide where we head with this. And I think that's really good because you're starting to talk about co-designing the culture with all of the members and not directing it.
Jamie, that's super resonant for us because in our work,
Hmm.
right, we're always espousing this notion of zero distance to the customer. In this case, you're sort of describing, that it's really got to be about the student and built around the student. But
Yeah.
just stepping back a couple of,
Yeah.
I think your points about storytelling are really interesting. And if I can kind of bring that together with your notion of um, maybe you're not ready to work with me, right? So it's sort of, this is a podcast about the insurgent mindset, right? So we haven't really on the podcast explored this idea that being able to tell a superior story and being able to do that in a way that's really differentiated, better, is a key part of that challenger mindset, right? So and I think what you're describing is like, if you're not willing to disrupt and change and do things differently, we're not a great fit for you, right? I think that's great. It's sort of like not the segment, it's the mindset that
Yeah.
matters. And then I think also, I think for leaders who, where we've seen organizations really break through, and you may be, for example, an education institution, it's a lazy incumbent industry typically, right? Where it's reached some kind of equilibrium over a really long period of time. The way course pedagogy is developed, the way courses are delivered, all of it feels very 1998, I don't know, 20th century at best, maybe 19th century, right? So that just hasn't changed. And then now we have this new flood of technology, of this capability that you mentioned with platforms, of ways to kind of bring together these stories that maybe existed on the periphery, but now are coming into the mainstream. I think it's a really interesting insight to sort of talk about how that storytelling becomes a big part of how the challenger breaks through and how the firm who's sort of stuck in a in a pattern that they're really having trouble getting out of, and making that shift to then maybe compete differently, or maybe think differently about how they engage with customers, or maybe just change the culture as you've described to be more nimble and organic, to be able to adapt to circumstances that are changing just so quickly it's almost impossible to keep up. What do you think about that, Jamie? Is that sort of a good summary of where you're kind of heading? Because I'm
Uh,
trying to steer you in a direction here around
well, here,
developing these ideas into how do we take the how do we take your learning and apply it to, this mindset that we're trying to help people create, which is to compete differently, to innovate how you compete, to innovate how you think about how you occupy the world.
yeah, okay. So the quote, and I might not get it verbatim, but Buckminster Fuller is credited with the quote, "Don't fight the current system, build a better one." And I think that's
Mm.
probably sort of an insurgent mindset. Like, don't put your energy into fighting, put it into building the better system, and people will just naturally gravitate to a system. Sometimes in business, it's a cheaper system or a faster system. In learning, I think it's a more enhanced experience, like a better experience with better outcomes, right? Not just a nice experience, but actual outcomes. Um, so I guess I think about that quote a bit. I think about there's another quote I heard is build a future or share a vision of a future that's just utterly irresistible, and the rest will take care of itself. So you're really putting the energy, time, and effort into building that thing, creating that thing, sharing the vision of that thing. I think execution, telling the story, and then you got to back it with execution. You can't just tell a story. It's like, like a movie, great script, bad execution. Like great script, great execution, and that's great. So you also need the execution. Um, yeah, I guess the other thing maybe that's a consideration when you mention technology is AI. I think we're this right now is such an unusual and interesting moment in time. And I think the conversations are interesting. And what I'm sensing a lot of is people not unraveling things in a much bigger way. Like I hear a lot of compression of putting all of AI in a bucket, like it does this and we don't like it, or it does this and we love it. And I don't think either are true. It's like it's a big spectrum. Jeff Bezos has a TED Talk talking about, and this is years ago, he was talking about AI is like what electricity was when that technology was invented.
Mhm.
That it was originally invented just to drive the light bulb, and nobody was thinking about thousands of appliances that would also run on electricity. So it was just centered on we need the electricity to get to the light bulb. And he says AI is kind of like electricity. And I would add to like it's like air and it's like water. It's energy. What are the appliances we're putting it into? Because I think that is more the layer of where you can start to articulate, I don't think that's a good use of it. That's a great use of it. It's the appliance. Um, so I guess I'm kind of the thread I'm going on is, yep, there's storytelling of vision, and then there's execution, and then current right now, I guess for leadership or learning institutions or thinking about learning, what are the appliances that you might consider putting AI into, and what do you want to do with it? And I'll just tell a little story maybe to articulate that better. I was listening to a podcast on Socrates, of all things, and getting back to, oh, yeah, I forgot about all that. Socratic line of thinking is questioning. He didn't give answers. He'd say, well, why do you think that? And what he was trying to emerge was contradictory thinking within one person's mind. Going, do you notice you think this and you also think this, and they're contradictory? And then he'd emerge that so the person themselves could explore their own mental model of thinking and be like, oh, yeah, wait, that doesn't make much sense, does it? And then there'd be a vacuum because you'd be like, oh, shoot, that mental model doesn't actually hold up. and he would then offer the opportunity to create an updated mental model of thinking. So how I tie that to AI is, are you using AI to give you a shortcut and cheat yourself out of learning, out of the friction of thinking and learning and critical thinking? Or are you using it to enhance your own awareness of what you think and how you can
Mm,
think better? So there's an example of like, what's the appliance that would give you this versus this? And I think a lot of people, because we're humans, we like shortcuts. We like to conserve energy, that our brain is designed to say, conserve energy. Goes for the shortcut. But to me, that's like, you don't want that prize. You don't want the shortcut. Another metaphor I'd offer is like, if you said, oh, yeah, we got this awesome robot, he goes to the gym for me. People go, that's dumb. Do you know? Like, you're not going to do anything for your health, your well-being, or your looks, right? So it's kind of like that. Like, why would you have the AI think for you? That's dumb. But, sometimes it's good. It saves time. But I think a collaborative partner that helps you explore your thinking, explore ideas, that's on a different order. Like, that's amazing. So I think maybe I drifted a little bit from the question that you were asking, but it's like this thread of like, what are we using technology for in a learning platform? What are we using AI for in a learning platform? What are we doing related to the learning experience itself? And I guess that does thread back to leadership, even in like, let's say not a learning institution, but a corporate learning institution.
mm.
The learning area, the learning and development area is how are you enhancing how learning happens culture wide at your company?
So I guess I want to come back to this sort of segment customers. So when you launched and you really were really focused on educational institutions primarily, right? Initially. But now that you've been out for 11 years or so, which types of learning platforms do you see yourself really competing against, or what types of organizations tend to be more, you know, embracing of your platform than others?
Yeah, like I guess it's nice having, I guess, the drive or just I guess the stamina or stubbornness to just keep going on this journey. And definitely, I now feel like it's really interesting because the journey, I've thought this for ages. It's the journey that's the interesting bit, not the outcomes, not those are all
Hmm.
byproducts. But just like any hero's journey, the story, the obstacles and the journey itself is where the action is, or like at least for me, that's what I tune to. So I guess I'm not thinking from a point of view of like, oriented to the market so much. And it's really diminished that I even think about competitors. Like I really am looking more inward,
Internal. Hmm.
and AI just was like a multiplier. It had been from the very beginning in the thinking for the personalization, but I never would have expected we'd be where we are in the last 24 months with not just the AI, like the written AI, but the visual AI, the images and the video, and that bridges straight into storytelling and the background in how you use visual to tell stories. And so I guess I'm so looking kind of in our own lane that I'm not really thinking in terms of who do we compete with pretty much anymore. It's more like what are we doing? And it was really neat. I've been listening to a great podcast, the Founders Podcast, David Senra's podcast. And I love that podcast. He's so passionate and he looks at connecting the dots like, oh, we heard Steve Jobs say this. And then he really looked to Edwin Land, the creator of Polaroid, and he said this, and then like Buckminster Fuller. So he connects the dots of all the thinkers, and he's really focused on people. He's also got George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and Stephen King. And so it's not just tech founders, it's a wide range of people that have chosen to go on their own hero's journey, their own journey of learning and living and having an adventure and creating an adventure. Didn't always go well. What does it take? I also read Stoic philosophy and find that
Mm,
that ties in nicely because it's really about who are you being inside of the journey you're having and what level of adventure do you want to have? Do you want to dial it up to a 10? Do you want to dial it down to a 2? That's all within everyone's control. Like how much risk and courage do you want to incur? And no, and a 10 isn't better than a 2. Like there's no, I don't think there is that equation. I think it's what do you want? You get to choose which theater you want to watch the movie in and of your
Mm.
own
mhm,
life.
mhm,
So I think I've really oriented listening to that podcast, listening to people like Edwin Land, the founder of Polaroid. I probably knew less than 0.0001% before I listened to the podcast. Same with James Dyson, and going, wow, there's the role models. What they did, how they spoke was, if another company's doing it, we're not going to spend any time on it. Let's go do something different. Why? Because that's our contribution to humanity. Why would we duplicate effort? Let them do it if they're doing it, especially if they're doing it well. Let's go find something different to do. And I love that so much. And I was like, wow, I never heard that until like in the last 12 months. I went, that's it. That's how I feel. That's like if other people are doing it, we don't need to do it. Let's figure out what we can do that's so utterly different with the things that I love and I've learned about from film and story, all the things that I shared at the start. So what could we do that's different? What could we do that no one's kind of thought to do and no one's working on? Because that might be really cool. And if it serves a really small segment in the market, great. And if it ends up serving a bigger
mm.
segment of the market, that's good too. Like I don't really orient now to like, oh, it's got to be all this. It's like, how good is the thing we're making? And if it really gets the results, the rest will take care of itself. I don't think we have
So
to chase anything.
So then what is your vision? Like, what's your vision for the organization as you look at out the next 3 to 5 years? What do you imagine for the organization?
The stuff that excites me is how do we make learning utterly magical and full of wonder? I kind of feel like if we're not doing that now with the technology we have, that's we're really missing something because l learning itself is the most magical thing. I think also in the David Center podcast, there was some when one of the podcasts he was talking about like books are time travel technology that we can
Mm,
listen to someone who lived in ancient Rome like their diary and hear what they were thinking
mm,
today, when you really think about that, that's crazy. That is the most incredible technology that we know what people were thinking, humans, 2000 years ago or further, or a different culture. So that to me is so magical. And you go, wow, why is so much learning occur as awful for people, for young people? Like, why is like, oh, I hate learning. Like, I'm thinking, no, you haven't seen it shown to you the way it could be shown. So that's
mm.
the vision. That's what I get excited about is how can we bring magic, wonder, awe, because it's out here in the world, in nature, in human culture. There's moments of awe and wonder and magic and things that, you have that in movies. You go, oh my God, that was like awe-inspiring. That changed my life. That gave me goosebumps. And I'm like, why isn't that happening in learning? We know how to do it with movies. So that's I think that's the vision.
And Jamie, that's really resonant, I think, for me, and I think also our audience. That's yeah, there's so much there. You're sort of implying, and I think maybe you'd agree that it's a choice. Either I'm going to be big, fat, slow, and lazy and do it like everyone else, or I'm going to discover the hero's journey, build a story and a narrative around that, and I'm going to take that and create this magical opportunity in the world. And I think it's sort of like it to me, that's sort of the essence of the challenger versus the kind of the incumbent is, you are intentionally deciding to compete differently, to lead differently, to engage your people differently, engage your customers differently. And if you don't do those things, you're just going to be with the pack, whether that's in
Mhm.
education or whether that's in not-for-profit land or whether that's in in the world's largest companies. And I think those examples that you sort of articulated, Dyson, Polaroid, et cetera, are these are leaders that are intentionally trying to break from the pack and create some new source of value, however that value is sort of communicated, right? And I think that's a really great way to sort of end the way we discuss this today, because as a capstone, right? This idea of the central character is the customer, the central character is you, and you write your own journey, and it's up to you to do that in a way that's bringing us all forward. And I think you're sort of because I know you really well, Jamie. One thing we haven't talked about, which is really interesting, is the role of that sort of dynamic. Um, um, you're not telling people how to experience a journey. You're exploring that journey with them. And I think to me, that's the magic of what you bring to the table. And since I've worked a lot with you, it's sort of like, we might sort of articulate a big idea or even a little one, and you're like, well, let's develop that a little bit and let's see where it goes. And then eventually you sort of end up in this new place. And I find that really, aside from the fact that it's amazing, it just is so stimulating intellectually. It's a joy to experience it. So I wish that more leaders had this sort of mindset, which is how do we just tell our story in a completely different way, and how do we do that to create new sources of value? I think that's really, really helpful. So, Jamie, any last bits of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
Um,
Maybe a couple of key lessons from what you've learned as an entrepreneur and a
Yeah.
storyteller?
I think it's definitely the thing around. I got this from James Dyson just in the last week. He said he's as stubborn as a mule, like being like a mule is what he's like. He doesn't think he's that brilliant. He goes, I'm just really stubborn, and that really it made me chuckle, but from a sense of like, oh yeah, and I've heard it in numerous places that the whether it's called resilience or stubbornness
Mhm.
or just being really driven from a vision, hopefully from a positive fuel, not a negative, like proving yourself, I think is not particularly the healthy way. But I think yeah, if you really if you're really excited by something or feel like very, that it lights you up from the inside to follow that. And I think, yeah, I guess that's a strong one with me to share because I would share that with all my students. That was my greatest wish for each of them. It's like this time we have together, I want to get you hooked into what your passion is. It has nothing
Mhm.
to do with me. I'm just here to help facilitate that and find it a privilege if I can help with that. But it's really grace that you're connecting to, your own internal grace. And you go the word tuition, intuition, it's all on the inside, all the actions on the inside. So I think following those threads on the inside and then having the stubbornness to not give up because you will be hit with obstacles. That's in every great story. It's not a very exciting movie if there's no obstacles. So kind of realizing that in our own actual lives, it is being orchestrated in that sense. So the obstacles are part of it. Lean into them, be thankful for them, and then be really stubborn. So you get to the end of the story with some good adventure.
Very good. Love it. Right. Be a
Excellent.
mule and not a
Excellent.
donkey.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I guess also that notion of absence of ego and all of that really kind of sings through in what you just described. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. And we wish you all the best in the future and look
Thanks.
forward to seeing great things.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jamie.